Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. And it's funny, I'm recording this and I typically don't record it at night. So I'm drinking coffee more than I'm drinking wine. And those of you who've listened before know, and if you ever go to YouTube, you'll see I like to promote my cute little mug that says, if it's morning, this must be coffee. And so far it has been coffee, but I'm heading to the Finger Lakes this weekend, so maybe I'll take it with me and fill it with something other than coffee. Well, this week, I know you probably get sick of me saying how excited I am about my guests because I say it every week, but it's true because I know some fabulous women. And I will say, I don't know personally my guest today, but we have a mutual friend in Tim Holmes. We're here in Scranton. I am an advocate and lover of the place I've grown up and chosen to live and make a life here in Scranton. And my guest today has done the same. And we have our mutual friend in Tim Holmes, and they work together on the Office convention, the Office wrap party. And she has a long list of amazing things that she's done. She is a powerhouse in architecture. She's done TED Talks. She has a proprietary design system she's created. So I could go on, but I am just so proud and pleased and privileged to be able to speak with her today and know that she is here in Scranton helping to make Northeastern Pennsylvania better for everyone. And I love that she is someone that young girls can look up to for a career in architecture. So I would like to welcome my guest today, Michele Dempsey. Hello, Michele.
Oh, hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Oh yeah, my gosh, of course I've heard about you forever. And Scranton's only so big. To quote my mom, and excuse my gruffness, she used to say, "You can't shit in Scranton." She actually still does say that because everybody knows everybody. So you have to be careful because you could be, throwing shade and someone's like, "Hey, that's my cousin." So you have to
100%.
you have to watch that.
I always say, Janine, like, I know somebody is from Scranton when their first question is, which Dempsey are you? Right? Or it's like, I totally know they're from the area, and I'm Michele Dempsey, which Dempsey? The laundry, the lawyer, which one, it's a list. But
Yeah, we're one of those.
As my dad says, if you shake the tree hard enough, we all fall out, right?
Oh my God. Yes. That's my grandmother used to say similar things about how we're all related more or less. Right.
Yeah,
And
right.
Scranton is one of those places here where it's small enough that you can do that. But yet I think it has a lot of potential with a bigger city kind of feel to it. Sometimes it's just kind of like
Sure.
stuck in the middle. It's kind of like a Jan, maybe a little bit.
Yeah. Totally. Great way to describe it.
So I don't even know where to get started with you. So because it's morning and when we're recording this, I'm drinking coffee, but let's talk just for a minute, just to get lightly started here with wine, because I did ask you beforehand if you do drink wine. Now, I happen to be a fan of white wines more than red. What are your preferences? What do you like in wine?
Oh man. So for years I couldn't drink it. Bad college experience with Boone's Farm. Full disclosure. But slowly, I'm like, I can't miss out on this thing. It looks too good. So, it depends on what I'm eating or what I'm doing. I always like a nice red. Red is always nice, but sometimes I want just something a little lighter. I've gotten into the whites more recently, but I hope I'm not sounding like some sort of connoisseur, because I'm truly not. I know when I sort of sip it if I like it and I can appreciate it. But there was a scene on Parks and Recreation with Leslie Knope, who's Amy Poehler's character, and she's at a restaurant and she orders a red wine, and she's like, make it the cheap one, because full disclosure, I can't tell the difference. Right? And I kind of, sometimes I feel that way, sometimes I'm like, I don't really know. I just know if I drink it, if I don't like it, or if it has too much of a bite, like a real like hard bite, I'm not really into it. But I do like to play with the wines and try different ones. And I am definitely that girl who goes in, if I'm bringing wine somewhere, I'm looking at the label. I want the fun label, like I want the thing that's going to make somebody laugh or whatever, as long as it's, I know it's not something cheap. And, it's going to turn people's noses. Like, I have fun with the labels, So
I love that. Yeah.
And honestly, wine for me, it's a social thing. It's like, did anybody not get through the quarantine and the pandemic, going over a loved one's house and just like sheer, uncorking a bottle and having a few glasses together to make it all go away. Right? But, so I love, like, my sister lives 2 doors away from me, very Scranton thing. Right? I actually moved into the neighborhood as soon as a house came up for sale in her neighborhood. I was like, I'm there. And I love being so close to her. She's got 3 kids and her husband's awesome. And I go over like a couple times a week and we just open a bottle and talk and have a great time. And so that's wine to me. It's the connections, once a week too, I go out with Tim and a bunch of friends. We call it Wherever Wednesdays. And there's always a bottle of wine, to go with the atmosphere. So that's wine for me. That's my way of using it.
And, I think that's probably more so, like, again, this is not meant to be conversation about like in a pretentious way at all, because I don't, one of my many side hustles, I am an independent wine guide for Traveling Vineyard, this company that sells it. And if they didn't give us the notes and all the information about the wine, I don't know how I would describe it personally, because I know what I like and what I don't like. And I know what's dry and sweet, but I wouldn't be able to tell you, oh, there's a hint of peppermint, there's a hint of papaya. Like, I don't know what the hell. It's like
with the taste of lavender, like
yeah. It's earthy. It's, you can taste the lava ash from the soil. Like, yeah, I don't think so, but I agree with you on the fun labels though. I've bought wine. I think Arrogant Bastard is one that I bought before because I just loved, there's a frog wearing a beret. Now, how could you not want to buy that? I mean, come on. That's just fun right there. So you're not a wine, connoisseur, but you enjoy it to connect, which I think is great. And you mentioned, okay, so we'll get into the Scranton stuff. You mentioned it's very Scranton to live by your family. I live in a double house, so I'm right next to my parents. So that is a very Scranton thing. But what, there are times that I'm like, why didn't I leave? But there are other times that I'm like, I'm here with my family. My parents are, everyone ages, but my parents are elderly now and they're still in great shape, but it's good to be here for them. And they do great things for me as well. So family is important in Scranton. What is it about Scranton now? I don't know. You could tell us if you ever left and came back. I know a lot of people do that. And so they come back because they know that it's home. And I think that's wonderful. Tell me a little bit about what it is about Scranton, your experience with it, and why you are such an advocate for it. And you're so, pro Scranton.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience to you in college, particularly when I would say I was from Scranton and people would tell me they're sorry. Like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, oh, that place sucks. And clearly, they've never been here. This is just what was in the zeitgeist, right? It was like, I'm like, why do you feel sorry for me? I had a nice childhood. Like, I did not get it, but it made me mad. Like, every time someone said that, I was like, stop, what's going on? Why do people seem to hate this place I'm from? And, what did it ever do to you? And that kind of followed me through the years. And so I went to college, then I went to graduate school for architecture. So I lived in Philadelphia for years, and then I moved down to Washington, D.C. And truly, I had come home because I designed a house for my parents, which is how a lot of architects, what they do and how they start. And I wanted to see it through construction because I spent a lot of time on it. And it was actually conceptually based on a pole breaker house, which is very, much about this area. My grandfather, who helped my dad start his industrial laundry business, was a breaker boy. And his father had died in the mines, like so many, And so I felt like paying homage was a nice thing. So when I came home, I thought after that I'd go back to the job in DC or go to New York City or something. And I really fell back in love with the area. Like, that's what happened. Chris Doherty was mayor and Sarah Hailstone was, heading up the economic development here, and things were really happening, right? Like, it could feel like an energy in the air. It was all about Restore the Pride. And, Natick Park was transformed. They were working on the 500 block of Lackawanna, and like the very first building was transformed to apartments, and lo and behold, nobody thought anybody would live downtown, and they couldn't get enough. They still can't build it fast enough, right? People just want to live downtown. And so a lot was happening. And somebody once described me as like an edge species, like a wild blackberry. They called me, like, I don't want to be where things have been fixed. I want to be like right on the edge of where I feel like I can impact something. Like, wild blackberries don't live in the lush forest. They live like right on the edge of the forest, and like where it's just not good for plants and they're right on the edge of of those conditions. And so I felt that's where Scranton was. So, I decided I always wanted to start a firm. I had just turned 30 and I said, you know what, this is where I'm going to do it. I'm going to help my hometown. And the other thing was I love being back here. There was an incredible music scene at the time. There were great people, a lot of young people in bars. Like I had as much fun here as I was having in the big cities. Like I just really didn't feel I had sacrificed anything. And so I started my firm and the rest is history, I guess. Right?
Yeah. And that's great. And I don't want to get too into politics, but I mean, the pandemic has changed a lot of places, not just here. Things have happened, but I guess it is big news. We could say this past week that Scranton's no longer considered a distressed city. So that's, I think, I feel like some of the progress got stalled along the way at points, but I think it's still a fabulous place as far as I like to say it's a lot about the people. I mean, not just the people, but the architecture. I had friends who came here from France in 2015 and Jean-Claude and Marie, his mouth actually gasped when he saw the inside of the Radisson, like the mosaic tiles and everything. So for people to not get that, it's like they live in France. Hello. So they know beauty and architecture and they loved it. So architecture, people, the artists, people like you. So I think there's still Scranton it has a ways to go, but I think it's still on the right track. Would you say?
Yeah, and I think the reason we have the great architecture is because they couldn't afford to demolish it, right? That's a good thing for us. And it was also because in the 1930s, Scranton had its heyday. We were one of the richest cities in Pennsylvania because of the coal. And so all this beautiful architecture got built. I mean, I think the Cultural Center, which was the Masonic Temple, was one of the reasons I became an architect. I used to, when we go to my parents would try to enrich us and they'd bring us to I'm losing the word, the symphonies, the symphony to watch. And I would just leave and go explore the building, and so, we're lucky to have the architecture that we have and it is beautiful. I mean, some of it's really jaw dropping and we have the walking tour. So yeah, I think we're coming along. And like you said, for me, being close to my family again was a big draw for moving back as well. So I have 14 nieces and nephews. I have 2 kids and they're all together. My grandparents have 14 grandkids. I see them every week. We all get together every week at my mom and dad's house, the house I designed for them, and we have dinner every week. And so, and I see them during the week tonight. I'm going to go up to my brother's house. Do you know what I mean? It's just so much fun to be around my family, and we're all close, so that works too. And my parents are aging, and I get to hang out with them and feel like I'm not missing that time. So love that part of it too. But as for Scranton, I think it definitely has come a long way. I do love that we have our first female mayor who's not from the area, who ran while she was pregnant, who now we're not a distressed city anymore. Of course, I love all that,
Yes.
Age. And that she met her husband because she stopped for a hoagie here while she was with another campaign. That's such a great story, right? But I do love that. I also live in a city. I'm 5 minutes from a lake, to 15 minutes from a lake, 5 minutes from skiing. People don't get that about this area, but and you take it for granted when you live here, but that's all amazing, So my whole thing is enhancing it and protecting it, right? So what I did with Tim, that was about bringing, trying to change the perception of Scranton. That was the office convention and the office wrap party, right? Our intention behind that wasn't just let's meet famous people. That wasn't what drove us and motivated us every day to do that. What motivated us was if we really pull this off, and we get people to come here and have the best weekends of their life in Scranton, that's going to get out into the world. And Tim probably said it, but the moment we knew that we had been successful with that was when the Philadelphia Inquirer had an article that said Scranton from cold to cool.
I love that headline. That is, and that is so cool. Yeah.
And we were just okay. And now, as you know, when you meet anybody from outside the area and you say you're from Scranton, now it's I love the office, and they want to talk about it. And that's what we're known for now. And it was a really, a little bit of serendipity that happened. And we sort of took advantage of it, and sort of ran with it, which is great. You got to run with what you got, whatever it is, use it. Right. And then people came here and realized it was a beautiful place. And it is, it is wonderful. And it does have all these things that people don't realize it has if you haven't been here. So that's enhancing it. And the other one's protecting it. So I'm one of the co-founders of Friends of Lackawanna, which is a group that protects the local environment. And we have been fighting for 7 years to stop the expansion of the Keystone Sanitary Landfill because it's in the middle of a community, right? And it's affecting our quality of life. And I could go on and on about that. I won't take up the next 45 minutes, but that's about protecting our area, right? And saying like, this isn't something that's going to enhance our image. This isn't something that's going to make our lives better. This is not in the appropriate place. This is not the right thing to do for another 50 years, keep dumping garbage on us. So those two things are equally important to me, like what can I do to try to promote this area and make it better? And what can I do to protect it? Those, because I love it. I mean, you see the sign behind, there's a picture behind me that I guess if you're watching the video, you can see, but it's the back of the Electric City sign, which is an iconic sign in downtown Scranton. And, I was touring that building because a client of mine was looking at it, and it's the back of it. So it's like showing that, we as architects, we look at things from a different perspective, right? But it's also in here because it shows the love of where I am. And I'm an architect from Scranton. We may do work out in Las Vegas, but, we're proud of where we're from and always will be.
I think that's awesome. I love what you said. So enhance, promote, and also protect, because that part's great. Like if you get everybody here, but then in 10 years, things get trashed or ruined, what's the point? You know what I mean? You want to protect it for the future generations. So much we could dive into there, but let's just go back for a second so the office convention, I talked about it a great deal in a previous episode with Tim Holmes. You guys brought that here and it was hugely successful. The wrap party. And a lot of the cast really, they seem to have enjoyed it. I listened to the Office Ladies podcast with Angela and Jenna Fisher. Every time they talk about something, well, it's funny because if they say something incorrectly, of course, I'm sitting here yelling at my phone. That's not true. That Lake Scranton, yeah. Of course, I post on Instagram like they're going to see me out of like 50,000 comments, but like Lake Scranton that you could swim and kayak in it the one day. And I'm like, that's not true, Jenna. That's wrong. But I love that they have interest in the city and they'll do their research and they promote it. And I believe you and Tim were also on Brian Baumgartner's podcast recently. Yeah. I think was that recently?
Yeah, very recently. I think it was November.
Okay,
early December. So we're in February now. Like it was a whole episode on his Office deep dive dedicated to Scranton. So that was really cool. Brian Baumgartner genuinely loves Scranton, like heartfelt, like just feels like it's his second home. And he's like, I don't know what it is. I just feel a connection to this place. And he has felt that since the first time he was here. I'm here to tell you because I was there. And he's just such a good soul, so he wanted to give Scranton its due. Like he really, every time he comes here, he's a rock star, and it's just great. So yeah, he had us on and we had a lot of fun with him.
That's very cool. And it's funny when I talked to Tim, of course I knew he wouldn't do it, but I'm like, you going to spill any tea? Who was a diva? Who didn't really like Scranton? He's like, oh no, Tim, of course he gave the
yeah.
He's not going to say anything.
I would say like the weird thing is they are all super nice and like there's always going to be somebody you connect with more than others or who feel a little more grounded than others, right? But generally speaking, I didn't feel like anybody was really like on their ivory tower and like treating others, but like they're just normal people. They're just such good folks because most of them weren't famous before the Office hit. I'd say other than Steve Carell, there really wasn't, and I guess then Helms had a little bit of he was on the Daily Show, so I kind of knew who he was when he got on, but most of them you didn't know, and that's like they're just so grateful for that opportunity, So and the funniest thing is that the one who could be the biggest diva, the one who could be I'm Mr. Superstar, which is Steve Carell, is universally any person will tell you, and he is the nicest person you could ever meet. Just so down to earth, so unaffected by all the fame. Like he is just so nice, right? Like when I met him the first time, it was in the green room. I went to see the set, and Andy Buckley, who plays his boss on the show, David Wallace, is like again one of the greatest people on the face here. Like he's the one you can call. Like I teach a class at Lafayette, and he showed up, on Zoom for my class one night.
Oh,
like
wow.
So great. And so he had told, I guess he had called ahead and told Steve I was going to be there. So I'm in the green room with like the CEO of Sprint, who was doing all the ads on TV for The Office at that time. He was one of their big donors, and the family of Daryl, who plays, Craig Robinson, who plays
Right.
Daryl on the show, right? They were there, and me. And in walks Steve Carell, and he looks at everybody when I introduce myself. He's like, "Oh, Michelle," he's like, "I heard you were coming." He's like, "Oh my gosh, it's so nice to meet you." And he's just going on and on and on. And I'm like, I felt so important. And it was just because, Andy had told him I was coming, but he did say at the time, he's like, I heard all about that convention. He goes, "I want to come to Scranton. I want to be in a big parade, and I want to be in a coffee cup. This is world's best boss." And he was having the best time talking to me, and it just was great. So he's generally a good guy. They all are, honestly. They are just good people. That could be the thing. I'll go through. What do you want to know about? And I'll tell you how awesome they are. And I'm just going to tell you how great they are. Because they just are good people.
Well, and I know I listen every week too. I listen to Brian's podcast sometimes, but I listen to the Office Ladies pretty much every week.
Yes.
And, they do often say, and others who've spoken have said like that Scranton really did help put them on the map and they do talk about how kind everyone was here and how excited everyone was here. And it really, that is a cool thing. And I hope, and they keep saying that they're going to come visit. I hope they do, because that would be very cool. I'm sure you will know, but that would be neat if they were coming.
Tim and I are always like planning.
I know.
The anniversary's coming. There's a lot of exciting things. I don't think, let me put it this way. If we have anything to say about it, and if they have anything to say about it, because they love Scranton just as much, the connection will not die. Like, it's going to keep going. I think there's some really fun stuff in the future that could happen. So
that's great. And I know Brian was here, when he was here with this book, and that was a couple months ago, I think, right?
Yeah, that was, I think was it January, or was it before? It was before Christmas. So
yeah, before Christmas. Yeah.
Before Christmas. Yeah.
And people, people are not sick of them yet. I know. And it's interesting how the pandemic, with people binging on Netflix, how so many more people were introduced to The Office. And I have friends with like 12 to 14-year-old kids who are like in love with The Office now. And I think that's great that they, because I often think that like the sense of humor is different, but they get it and they enjoy it too. And I don't know if it's for the same reasons, it doesn't matter, but that they're introduced to it and enjoying it as well, which I think is great.
Yeah, I have a friend from New Zealand whose daughter is like the biggest fan. That she's watched it through I don't know how many times, and I think it's just that's the whole point of Brian's podcast, was trying to get to like, why is The Office bigger now? Like, how many years later, at least 17 years later, almost 20 years later, than it was even at the time. It was a big show at the time, but it's even bigger now. It's like one of the most streamed shows on Netflix. And I think, first of all, the show is made to be streamed. It's just a perfect show for streaming. But they say it like connects to different ages. And there's lots of reasons why, right? Mostly it's just a great show with a lot of really fun humor. But they say kids connect to it because they can relate to it being like the classroom with the crazy teacher, and you can't get away from them, and you're stuck with these people, and if you work, you can relate to that. So at any age, you can kind of relate to that environment. But for me, it's just like a warm blanket. Like, I just put it on and I just feel good. And it always makes me laugh, even if it's the sixth time I've watched an episode. And lucky me, I don't have the best memory, so I forget what's going to happen. I'm like, oh, that was really funny.
It's like the first time again, right?
First time, every time. So yeah.
I'm like that. Like, Seinfeld was my go-to show, and I will watch that a million times and still laugh. But The Office, it's a different kind of funny, but it's so funny how I'll see an episode for like the 10th time and I will still crack up. And just the way that Steve Carell delivers a line or mispronounces a word, and I just shake my head and talk out loud to myself. That cracks me up. It's just so entertaining. And that has such great value to make us feel good, especially I think during the pandemic. We needed that, like you said, a warm blanket. We needed comfort, that's for sure.
Yeah, and there it was. And it was such a talented cast that like there are such layers to the show, right? Like, you've been looking at the person who's making whose moment it is, but in the background is somebody doing something hysterical, and they thought that they were thinking, like Brian said, like he was always in the back going, what can I do to like kind of enhance this scene, So it's great. Like and the humor's so smart, and it was very different. I think Greg Daniels said he was trying to steer the ship of comedy, right? So get it off the laugh track, 2-camera documentary style, which of course had been started over in the UK with Ricky Gervais doing it for that, you know, the original version of The Office over there. But he was borrowing from Christopher Guest, who did This Is Spinal Tap, right? The first documentary, right, that I know of anyway. Maybe he was borrowing some from somebody, but you know, he was influenced by him, and then he did this show that sort of was groundbreaking in terms of the setup. And then, you know, Greg brought it over here, and you know, everybody was afraid of trying it because every British show had failed up to that point. You know, every remake of a British show had just tanked. But Greg Daniels is just brilliant. They found their own voice, they took it their own direction, and you know, now we have something like kind of epic for the ages. You know, it's just so unique.
And something that's helped,
I think, timeless.
Yeah. And something that's helped Scranton. And if we can be associated with that, that's pretty cool.
I love being associated with it, you know, and I told this story, but like when I first heard, being a fan of The Office, the UK version, when I first heard it was going to be based, the US version was going to be based in Scranton, I didn't even know the mayor well, but I went right to his office and I was like, I need to meet with that mayor. I'm like, I just need to tell you, this isn't a good thing. I'm like, Slough was where it was based in the UK, and they just were terrible to Slough. They just made it seem like, you know, the city that was the road to nowhere. And I'm like, I don't think this is good for our image. And he's like, I don't know. I talked to the creator and he said he was going to be good to us. And I'm like, okay. And that was Greg Daniels. And of course, the way he treated Scranton versus Slough, he treated Scranton just like another character on the show, quirky and fun, and, you know, kind of took care of us. You know, it comes off much more realistic to who we really are, quite frankly. Like, I think he does a pretty good job with that. And that's because they came here and he brought the writers. He brought all the writers, Janine, and they just went everywhere. They went all around the city. And that's why from the season when they came here, I think it was season 3 forward, there's so much, like they really like doubled down on the references to Scranton and making them very realistic. That was cool too.
Yeah. And like you said, we could talk about that for a long time, but I want to talk a little bit more about you and architecture. And we talked a little bit so far about Scranton's architecture, things that have inspired you. I love that you designed your parents' home. Like, how cool is that you can be there and enjoy it with your family? I think that's amazing. But I'd love to talk a little bit more about what is happening with women in architecture, how that's changing. And we know with all the promotion of STEM these days that it's changing from when I was young. I mean, I turned 50 this year. So it's like, you know, that wasn't a thing, you know, and I grew up with the stereotype that was probably even stronger years ago about women or girls not getting into math and science as much or whatever, but that's being, you know, erased, and young women are really getting into these fields. But talk a little bit about how you've seen the field change for women, and maybe even some words of wisdom for young women.
Yeah. So, you know, when I always knew, like I sort of did a little research before I wanted to be an architect. I didn't know what that meant or, you know, what it was like to work in the field. And everybody I talked to, you know, over and over was like, well, are you sure you want to do this? You know, like, it's not, you know, it's not like for all the education you need to get, it's not like it's the best paying field in the world. And like, it's very demanding and so on and so forth. So it's like, people try to scare you out of it for good reason, right? For very good reason. They were right. All those things are true. You know, it's crazy that like for such the service we offer, you know, it's not always valued to what we do. And so, you know, I didn't really think, I never in my life, tried to like, never wanted being a woman to be the thing that like, I kind of ignored it. Do you know, I don't want that to influence me in any way. Like if a guy can do it, I feel like I can do it. And so, but I did know it wasn't a field that certainly, and so here's where it's come around to. If you go to the schools, it's like 50-50. Like in the architecture schools, it's like a 50-50 ratio at the moment, which is great. But if you go 10 years out, 20 years out, it drops off pretty dramatically. And that's because it is a very demanding field. And it's demanding in time, it's demanding in energy, it's demanding in, like, it's stressful, you know, like there's a lot of, it can be a whole lot of fun, but like, again, you have to realize like the fun, like the design is the fun part, but a lot of it is the technical side of it and going out to the field and making sure things are being built right. And like that, and so there's a lot of, there really is a lot of things that can be liability and things of that nature. So, so first, just getting your license is a road, So for women, like a lot of them don't get their license. They'll work in firms where, you don't need to stamp drawings. And so, you can kind of move up the chain and never really have to become an architect. And so, still be learning everything you would learn, but not take the exams, because the exams are pretty rigorous. I think they're up to 9 exams now. I think it's 8 when I took them, but like 9 exams, everything from, of course, there's design, there's, you have to, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, you have no structural, it just goes on and on. There's like 9 exams and they're very rigorous, and, people usually take them over the course of a year or 2, or some people over the course of 5 years. It's just takes time. And so, so that's one, is actually being licensed, because you can't really start a firm until you're licensed. And then once you're licensed, if you decide to start a firm, there are very, very few just women-owned firms. Like there are a lot of partnerships, there are a lot of like husband-wife, and things of that nature, but very few like 100% women-owned firms. And that's for another good reason. It's very hard as you get, like, by the time you get your license, now you're into your age, you're at an age, because you've done undergrad, undergrad for 4 years, grad for 3 years, or you've done undergrad for 5. There's different roads, but let's do my road, right? Undergrad for 4 years, graduate school for 3 years. You have to do at least 3 years of interning, right? So now you're towards the end of your 20s, right? And what's happening towards the end of your 20s is a lot of people are thinking, okay, it's time to get married and think about family and all of these things, especially for women. There is a kind of 15-year period there where, like, after age 35, as let's just be real here, it's much harder to think of having kids and doing all these other things easily, right? So things there is a biological clock factor. So just as you're ready to sit for these exams is also the time a lot of people are ready to start families. And then once you have have your license and you're starting a firm is rigorous in and of itself, right? I didn't start until I was 30. And that's probably, quite frankly, probably too young, right? Like you're still, but I was like, how do I not do it now if I want to potentially have all these other things later, So, so again, you've got like, where do you start a firm? How do you get clients? Like you're not taught. Like, I think I spent the first 15 years of my firm learning to run the business, right? Because that's not what I learned in architecture school. I learned how to be a good architect. So on and so forth. So there's a lot of reasons why I think women, don't end up necessarily as proprietary, like owning their own firm or not doing it without partners or something of that nature. So it makes sense. And I share all this openly with them. Do I think it's impossible? No, right? Could somebody do it better than me? Yeah, probably. But so I just get very honest with the women who want to do it. I let them see, here's my path. Here's what I did. I'm divorced, but I got married when I was 37. Do you know what I mean? Like the kids kind of went down, the idea of having kids became a lot harder. So I actually adopted kids 5 years ago. I had, which is, I'm thrilled. Like that is, that was my journey. That was my
congratulations.
Journey.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I love them. They're here actually. Talk about work life, right? Like
yep.
They didn't go to school today. So it's all work life integration, isn't it? Like,
but you make it work. Yep.
You just make it work, So, but I have managed to, to have a firm and to, enjoy the work we're doing, and I'm proud of the work that we do. But yeah, it's difficult it is a difficult road that I don't think is for everybody. And so I wish it could be easier. So I would, so it would be easier for women to get into and to do. I think there are a lot of other ways of doing it that are easier. Like one path that was available to me when I was down in DC, and there's a firm out of New York City I was working for called Buyer Blender Bell, and they had just started a DC office. So it felt very entrepreneurial because it was myself and Hani Hassan, and I was his first employee, and we were like, he was involving me in everything and the hiring and the this and that, like just, my opinion and stuff, but like he was really like involving me in a lot, and it felt like we were building this little thing, but we had this huge ship behind us handling the human resources and the healthcare and the what can we give you? And, they had the resources to help build this thing that when I eventually did it myself, I had to do all that from scratch, right? So at one point, Handy talked about when I said I was thinking of coming back here in my parents' house, he's like, well, come back. He's like, I want to put you on a partnership track. And that probably, if family and kind of like having a lifestyle that would be conducive to both being an architect at a very high level in partnership and having a family and doing those things, that would have been a good choice. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's not like it's not possible in this world, that because then, maternity leave and all of those things are it's a big firm. It's been around for a long time, and they were really good about, all like understanding those commitments and working with women who wanted to have families. So I think there are definitely, it's like, where do you work and who can support you wanting to do those things, right? Or needing to do those things. So I think that's another road. But for me, there was no stopping. Like, I was one track minded. I'm like, no, I want my own firm. I always did. I come from an entrepreneurial family, and like nothing was going to be good enough. Nothing in my head was like, it just had to be, I want to start a firm. I want to guide the ship. I want to decide what we do. I want to have the vision. And so here I am.
So before we wrap up, I'd like to ask you, so two more things. One, I would love for you to share a project or something that you're most proud of, or your favorite. And then another thing would just be, I'd ask you a mistake that you learned from, or a lesson that you've learned, because everyone learns hard lessons. But first, let's do what's a project or something you worked on that's your favorite, and why, or one of your favorites? I know sometimes it's hard to choose.
Yeah, that's like the kid thing, isn't it?
I was going to say, yeah. Which one do you love more? I love them all equally. Sure you do.
It's so like that, it's very hard because, you do pour your heart and soul into every project you do, right? And, but I think, I think the project that brought me back here was the one that I was the most emotionally invested in my life, which is my parents' house, right? Because they gave me everything, right? Like, my parents, like, they really, and to be able to give back to them, through the education they helped provide me, through everything that they, we're going to help, like, there was no lack of, like, I didn't have the best clothes. I was the third kid, I had a lot of hand-me-downs. I never got the new stuff. But if there was anything educational, or that my parents felt was somehow going to enhance me as a person or my education, like, it was like, no holds barred, go do it. And so to finally be at a place where I could use all that stuff they gave me to give back to them. And, and it was the first house, so it was a journey for sure, and it was not an easy one. But, the house has like such a connection to our family history. And at the end of the day, I still love it. They've been in it since 2004. And I go up and my mom will still tell me things that she loves about the house, and like something new she discovered, or like whatever. And now I can see as they age that we planned so well for aging in place. We put an elevator in the house because I'm like, if you want to stay here forever and you want to live on the second floor to get views of the lake, we have got to put an elevator in. And they were all about it, because my grandmother at the time was like 100 and she just had bad knees, so she couldn't take a step. And so they were all in. So didn't have to, yes, we're putting in an elevator. And we thought of the bathroom and everything that we thought of to create like a transgenerational house, like that somebody could raise kids in or be old in, like kind of in a happy way, works. And they still, my dad's like, he's like, the fact that I can still be in my home, even at an older age, struggling, with certain things, like that, to him, he's like, it keeps you happy and keeps you alive, and so so for me, that house probably has the most meaning for all those reasons, because it was my mom and dad,
it's great that you get to enjoy it too. And I love what you said about, thinking about, I'm sure that's so much part of what you do also, like thinking of the use of what you're designing, like, and, thinking of how, as they get older, it could still be functional and also make them happy. I think that's wonderful. So you're thinking of people in everyday life when you're creating these designs.
Versus when we're doing, like, when we did all the retail stores out in Las Vegas, like all along the strip, we have stores up and down the strip. those are very temporal. Like they have a 10-year lifespan, maybe 15, right? So you're thinking about it in a much different way than you're thinking about somebody's forever home, right? You're spinning different wheels in your head, and it's fun to spin both of them, like that's a thing. And that was what you were mentioning. We talked about this a little bit. The one store, just I'm watching Modern Family one day, and a whole scene of the show just takes place in one of the stores we designed at Mandalay Bay called Ruby Blue, right? And it was like, I'm like, hey, that's nobody called to let us know. Like nobody, I don't even think they cleared it with our client. I think they just cleared it with Mandalay Bay, and I was like, of all the stores in all of in all of Las Vegas, they picked ours, and it looked great. It was fun. That was a lot of fun.
That's really neat to be watching a sitcom and go, hey, I created that.
So
that's really neat.
Yeah. But now we do a lot of workplace, right? And like even after the pandemic, I mean, the workplace is always going to be with us. I think it's going to move to more hybrid as it has, and I think as it will for a long time. But, we realized that people were spending, that people really get emotional and spend all this time thinking about their forever home or their dream home. And then you go to the office and often they're drab and uninspiring, or people are working in spaces without natural light. And so we came up with that proprietary system that I told you about. It's called the Strategic Branded Experience Framework. And when we apply that, we know the spaces are going to be healthy, beautiful, inspiring. They're going to be sustainable. They're going to be places that attract and retain talent. And we know that because we measure it, right? So we call it return on design investment. And I love being able to make that 80% of people's day that they spend at work wonderful too, right? And create different areas. We call it activity-based design, create different areas based on the task you're performing, so that you don't just have to feel stuck at a desk all day. You can go to different parts of the office, like we did here when we designed our own office. I'm in my office when I'm doing certain work. I'm sitting down on the couch when I have to read through a code book or review drawings. We're out in the town center when we're collaborating. We use the conference room for different things. It's just great, and it mixes things up. And so that's what we do. And the fact that we know it works because we measure it, I think is like the proof is in the pudding. But so workplace is something that we've really gotten into because we love to tell people stories. And that's the brand part of it. Like kind of, we say we create inspiring spaces that tell your brand story. And that's what we're up to, because all of these, especially family businesses and nonprofits, they have these amazing stories to tell. And so we say our litmus test is, if you walk into one of the spaces that we've designed and you don't speak to a soul and you leave, you'll know what that company is up to in the world, what they do and what they're up to in the world. Like you'll have no doubt, because we'll make the walls talk and tell the story through how the space looks and feels, so that's what we do now. And it's a lot of fun. Really enjoy it.
That's awesome. And how crazy that it's almost like a duh. Of course, where people work should be nice, right? I mean, it's like, and I know I worked for 11 years at Blue Cross, and they were, like so many other places, you sat in a cube where you stared. That's why I was one that always had a lot of pictures. I had toys. I brought in like a Vincent Van Gogh action figure because I love him. His head came off. I mean, Austin Powers action figure. Yes, because I'm a freak or weirdo that way. But you had to make it a little fun, because you don't want to stare at like this gray fabric where you pin like a corporate memo. I mean, so it makes sense. Yeah. And I love that. I mean, the workforce or the workplace environments are changing, like you said, with hybrid. So it's home, it's sometimes for meetings, whatever, but it should be a place that, because doesn't that just make sense though? And I mean, to make people happy, they'll be more productive, more satisfied, and it makes everybody better.
It doesn't just make sense, it's been proven, right? So one of the factors, we have 5 factors in our framework, and one of them is, evidence-based design, research-based solutions. Like that's when we approach a project, we don't do it from, this feels good. We do it from, well, we researched this, we know this works. We know when you create these kind of spaces, and when you bring in natural light, you bring in plants, you do the right colors, you lay out the space, right? You do the activity-based design. When you do all these things, we know it works, right? So it's using that evidence and kind of making sure we're on top of the research to show that these are the things that are going to impact productivity. And that's not just like, it's not just about a pretty space, right? It's like the air, are you thinking of how you're treating the mechanical systems to make sure that the air is clean and filtered the right way, especially in these COVID days? Is the furniture ergonomic and comfortable? Are people, literally just comfortable while they're sitting there? What are the noise levels? These are things that really impact people's work days. You know, if it's too noisy and you're distracted and you can't get your work done, you know, that impacts your productivity. So we think through all of that. And that's, you know, that's a big, important part of what we do. That's the research side of it. So if we need white noise systems, we put them in, because you get these big open offices and it's like, it can be great, but it can also be distracting, you know? So it's really how you really have to think through all that stuff. And that's what, you know, we've become expert in over the years.
That just sounds, again, that could be a whole conversation. That is so interesting. And I just think that's so amazing. Like, so it's a cool part. You get to be creative, but you're also thinking through things. And you said research based, which how can anyone argue with that, right? When you're showing them the proof is in the pudding, right?
Yeah, it's very technical. Like what we do is like but I find that part to be fun too. You know, when I know, like I like doing the research and the deep dives and like making sure that what we're doing is something that's going to, because we're impacting people's lives, right? We're making their day better. If you come to a space, and we know it because we just did it for ourselves, right? We just moved into this new office in November. So and you could talk to anybody in the office, we know it's not like our old office was it's a nice office. It was designed 10 years ago or whatever it was. But it was now time to apply for ourselves what we've been doing for our clients. And we did. And like, it does make a difference. And like today, as you know, it's ice and snow out there. Everybody showed up. And I said, hey guys, use your discretion. If you want to work from home, like be safe, like don't push it if you don't want to. Everybody's here, like it's just because it's just a good environment to work in, so I'm really happy about that. And they all participated in designing it, right? So it was a real collaborative effort. But when we do that for other people, we do a visioning meeting because we want to make sure everybody's voice is heard, that the people who are going to be using this space feel like they had a voice in making sure it was going to have everything that they needed and wanted. And that's why those visioning meetings are really important. And we look back and we're always like, we got it, like if we can look back and say we check all those boxes, then we know we've done a good job.
Yeah, that's great. Well, in closing, I would just ask the last question. So what's next for Michele Dempsey?
Right. Right. That's a good question. I think we're just at the precipice of what we can do with our strategic branded experience framework. I think there's a lot of places we can go with that. So we're really excited about, especially as we continue to get the data that shows, okay, this is working. So kind of continuing to move forward with that, and then I love these podcasts. We actually put a podcast room in our office. So, maybe do something with that down the road a little bit. That'd be a lot of fun. Just I'm a mom. So, I got these two kids, they're teenagers now. And I think just seeing them through these years is going to be a big part of my next, this next chapter as well. So, exciting things on all sides and community. So my life falls into three circles that overlap. And it's what I'm doing at work, what I'm doing at home, what I'm doing for my community, right? And, the community is Tim and I will always be planning something office related, at all times, as we, continue to be now. And then, we'll continue to fight this landfill expansion until the end of days, until, there's nothing left to fight. And then family, it's like my kids and my nieces and nephews, and making sure these two little guys are grown up to be good human beings. And then work is like just continuing to grow. I think we've got a nice niche here, and it's something important, especially in these times and after COVID, to make sure where people work is wonderful. And so right in the middle of all that is sort of where my personal joy comes from, is happiness through helping others. That's really where they all come together, so that's what's next for me, just continuing to do that.
Well, and that's a lot. So it's a lot of good stuff. So, well, I want to thank you so much, because again, I know, I mean, just hearing that, we know that you're obviously busy, and I do appreciate you taking time out to share with my listeners. And just like I said, my goal is to promote women especially, but to help maybe inform people, learn a little something, inspire, think of their own lives differently, maybe what they'd like to do, and maybe get a little bit of entertainment. So hopefully we've done that today. And I think we have. I want to thank you. You were a fabulous guest. You've shared so much for us to think about, and I learned a lot. So thank you
Oh,
so
good.
much.
You're welcome. And Janine, any young women out there who are interested in architecture, I have them here all the time. So please, just contact me. You can come and shadow for a couple of days. And then I always encourage them to go see other size firms and offices too, just to get a real sense of what the field is like. But, I know that's a big part of what you do is empowering women. And so just know that that's something I'm always willing and I love to do for the young women out there.
That's great. So in my podcast description, can I just put your website for your business
Sure.
in? Okay,
Yeah.
then I'll do that. And so again, that's a great offer. Thank you so much, Michelle. And I think it's wonderful for young people to see, because it may or may not be for them, but they have to see it to know and kind
Yeah.
of experience it a little bit.
Because
Yeah.
the office is different than the school environment. They're two different worlds. And so you should see both. But they really like anything you're interested in, right? To anybody out there who's listening, if you're interested in a field, go. There are so many people who are willing to do mentorships with the small business development, but the University of Scranton, they'll help arrange that stuff for you too. Like go see what it is, because you want to know where you're going to be spending your time and your days, what it's like, when the time comes. And especially if you need to set the course for what you're doing in school or studying in college, because that's a lot of money, so make sure you're going after something you would love to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Or at least for part of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's good advice. All right. Well, thank you again, Michelle.
This is joy. Thank you.
You've been listening to another episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl, and this is Funny Wine Girl, aka Janine Luby. I want to thank you so much for listening. I thank you from the bottom of my heart and the bottom of my wine glass. Go out there and design something wonderful for yourself and for those around you. Thank you so much for listening.